To many people, the choice has become as polarizing as Democrat or Republican, Giants or Patriots, Federer or Nadal. These days, you either own an Apple iPhone or you're a holdout, in which case you most likely make calls and send texts with a Galaxy S iPhone made by Samsung Electronics. While there are hundreds of models to choose from, the smartphone war increasingly is a two-horse race between Apple ticker AAPL and Samsung Electronics 005930. Korea. Together, these two companies will sell 49% of the planet's smartphones this year, but account for nearly all the profits, and the web overflows with noisy opinions about whose is superior. Investors face a more intriguing choice: which will be the better stock to own over the next year? Both are winners in their own right. Each stock has more than tripled since 2009, but still is staggeringly cheap. Apple sits on $29 billion of cash, pays a 2% dividend yield, but fetches just 10.5 times projected 2013 profits, well below its median of 28 times over the past decade. Samsung's sole listed shares trade at just 6.7 times projected profits. Both are roundly revered. 56 of the 64 analysts who cover Apple urge you to buy its shares, while 47 of 48 who follow Samsung suggest you do the same for that stock. Apple has the planet's biggest stock market value, while Samsung is the reigning world champion in terms of technology revenue. It holds other titles as well, such as world's largest TV maker, biggest LCD panel manufacturer, and number 2 chip maker, behind Intel. So who'll come out on top? The contrarian in me wants desperately to make a case for Samsung, which led 12 places in Brands' 2012 ranking of top 100 global brands and still ended up at just number 55. It has so much room to improve. In contrast, rooting for Apple seems about as original and odious as cheering for the New York Yankees. But while Samsung may be the underdog, Apple is the more underappreciated stock. That gives Apple the edge in about between these two heavyweights. The winner not by knockout, but by decision. Yes, Earth's #1 brand just may be its most misunderstood company. Officials at both concerns declined interview requests, but since Apple peaked at a record above $702 mid-September, its stock has corrected 25%, to about $526. Concerns were already rife that the Cupertino, California, tech giant had lost its creative dazzle after the 2011 death of its chief executive genius, Steve Jobs, and recent missteps have only exacerbated those fears. A petty decision to drop Google's GeoG Maps from its new iPhone made Apple seem unusually fearful of its competition. Well-publicized labor abuses at Apple's Asian suppliers gave the impression that it was losing control of its supply chain, and things got worse when Apple couldn't make enough new iPhones to meet the clamorous demand. Smelling blood and eager to depose the king, the mainstream media rushed to trumpet Apple's decline. Things got uglier after Apple reported fiscal fourth quarter results in late October. While revenue grew 27% and profit expanded 24%, Apple beat analyst targets by the slimmest margin in years. Management told investors to expect per-share earnings of just $11.75 this quarter, well below $13.87 a year ago. It also cut projected gross margins from 40% to 36%, which money managers took as a sign that Apple is losing its competitive edge. The word on Wall Street was that Apple had slipped from hypergrowth to merely healthy growth, and that it was time to bolt. But what investors fail to grasp is that this margin compression really is part of Apple's long-term strategy. Today, 2 of every $3 Apple earns comes from selling iPhones, which boast gross margins near 55%. See table. Yet when Apple first began selling this iconic product, it went head-to-head against well-capitalized and then formidable foes like Nokia NOK and Research in Motion RIM. So Apple's strategy was to come in with a premium product at a premium price, make the best phone it could, and nibble away at market share from the top end, before gradually moving down in price, says Tony Ursulo, Luma sales technology analyst. It was a strategy Apple had used to great success before, having carved out the lucrative niche with pricey iMacs and e-books in a personal computer market once ruled by Dell, Hewlett-Packard, HP and International Business Machines IBM. That strategy shifted when Apple began selling tablets in 2010. Here was a new market that Apple helped create and which had no entrenched competitors. This time, Apple's priority was to grab as much market share as it could, and make it tougher for new entrants to join the fray. So it priced tablets more aggressively, at least by Apple's standards. iPad's 32% margins are well below its corporate average. As a result, 2 years after the iPad was born, Apple still sells 2 out of every 3 tablets worldwide. That stellar share briefly dipped to 50% last quarter, frightening investors, but Apple's customers were merely holding off ahead of the much-anticipated launch of newer iPads. Right on schedule, Apple this month began selling iPad minis with a starting price of $329 and even lower margins. And analysts expect its share to bounce back despite new tablets from Google and Microsoft MSFT.